All right, 4 a.m. here on the U.S. East Coast. And first, a major development in diplomacy. The president of South Korea has announced he's sending a delegation of high-level officials to North Korea on Monday for a two-day visit.
One purpose, to build on the dialogue that developed between the two Koreas during the Winter Olympics. Another, to open a path to direct talks, perhaps, between North Korea and the United States. Joining us from Seoul to give us some context is Andrew Stevens, and our Will Ripley, who has reported from North Korea numerous times, is live for us from Beijing. First to you, Andrew. The two Koreas extending the goodwill from the Olympics. This sounds perhaps significant. Tell us what you know about this meeting.
Well, it is significant just in the fact that they are actually having a meeting, Natalie. This will be the first time in years that they have sat down, and the South Koreans are sending some heavy hitters in their delegation. It's a delegation of 10 people. It's led by two security czars, though, if you like. Hu Soon is basically, Su Hoon is the head of the National Intelligence Service, the NIS, and he is a man who has deep experience in dealing with inter-Korean relations. He was actually a key player in two summits in year 2000 and year 2007 between North and South Korea, the two presidents there. So he is well versed in getting the two Koreas to the table. He'll be joined by Chung Oi-yong, and he's the head of the National Security Bureau, which is basically, he's the security advisor to the president of South Korea himself. And he brings to the table very, very strong links with the United States. It's said that he's got H.R. McMaster, the National Security Advisor, actually on speed dial. And it's no coincidence that after this meeting, they will be heading, that delegation, at least these two key players, will be heading to Washington to report to where they're going. What are they going to talk about? Well, inter-Korean dialogue is on the table, understandably, but also the conditions for a US-North Korea negotiation. And that's obviously the key here. Can they make a breakthrough, the North and the South, so the South can convince the North to sit down with the US and start talking about nuclearization on the Korean Peninsula, Natalie?
That would be quite a breakthrough. Andrew, thank you. Let's go to Will now. Will, you've been in the country many times. What will North Korea want from this first step? How critical is that U.S. connection, and how enthusiastic do you think they are that this is happening? As we just heard from Andrew, it looks like South Korea is sending some serious power brokers.
Yeah, this is the highest profile trip from south to north since 2007, when South Korea's former president met with Kim Jong-il. And so, yes, it is significant. This is not unexpected. We heard during the Olympics in Pyeongchang that South Korea would be sending a high-level delegation shortly after the Olympics wrapped up, and that's exactly what will be happening on Monday, local time. But look, the North Koreans, there are a couple of different factors at play here. One, the sanctions. They are really starting to kick in. I was meeting with a source today who described it when there used to be 100 trucks going across the border between China and North Korea. Now there are just 10 trucks. And so that's starting to have a significant impact on the country's economy. And the medium and long range forecasts have a devastating impact potentially if these sanctions continue. There's also really troubling language from the Trump administration for the North Koreans. You heard President Trump just last week talking about if diplomacy doesn't work, that he'd have to move into phase 2, which a lot of people widely interpret as a military option, a strike against North Korea. You had a GOP senator saying that there could be, loss of life that would be biblical in scope as a result of that. And so the North Koreans, they want to talk to the South Koreans and try to figure out what is going on inside the Trump administration. What does the United States want here? Because the North Koreans have steadfastly insisted to me in numerous conversations and all of their public messaging that their nuclear weapons are not up for negotiation, that denuclearization is not something that they're even willing to consider. So it's difficult to think, given the hardline stance in the United States and the hardline stance in North Korea, how these two sides are going to come together and form some sort of a deal. But at least they're talking, and that is the first step, Natalie.
Right. Well, President Trump made remarks on Saturday about North Korea. Let's look at what he said during an event. Here it is. They called up a couple of days ago, he's talking about North Korea, and said, we'd like to talk. And I said, so would we, but you have to denuke. You have to denuke. So let's see what happens. Does it seem like North Korea is reaching out directly to the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know if there was a back channel phone call made to President Trump. Obviously, he conveys the intricacies of diplomacy in very plain-spoken ways, and that's part of the reason that his message resonates with so many people. He kind of lays it out there in a very conversational way. Did North Korea actually call up? Our sources in Washington don't believe that the president was joking when he made those remarks. And again, it does show at this point a willingness by the North Koreans to engage directly with the Trump administration. And keep in mind, that is a shift from not too long ago when President Trump was hurling insults back and forth with Kim Jong-un. President Trump was insulted very much in North Korean state media. They called him a dotard, an old senile lunatic. And in fact, some North Korean officials told me in visits last year to Pyongyang, they didn't think it'd be possible to engage in any direct talks with this administration. But obviously, their viewpoint has changed. And, you know, some would say that the sanctions and the threats of potential military escalation have pushed it to this point. But of course, the North Koreans aren't really publicly saying why they're willing to talk, but they are saying and acknowledging that they do need to talk with the United States in order for the situation to improve with South Korea as well.
Extremely hopeful. We'll talk to you in a moment about another story we're following. And Andrew Stevens, thank you. Well, the U.S. president has criticized China mercilessly in the past, but he's praising a proposed change now to Chinese law, and that would be abolishing presidential term limits.
That's right. Listen to what Mr. Trump said on Saturday during a speech to donors at his Mar-a-Lago estate.
Don't forget, China's great, and Xi is a great gentleman. He's now president for life. No, he's great. Hey, look, he was able to do that. I think it's great. Maybe we'll have to give that a shot someday.
Well, that move is likely to pass at this week's annual session of the National People's Congress in China. President Xi Jinping is also expected to be elected to his second 5-year term, which would have been his last under China's current law.
Mr. Trump, though, not as supportive of the European Union. At that same fundraiser, President Trump accused the European Union of banding together to beat the United States on trade. He called the EU policy brutal for the U.S. Mr. Trump has proposed tariffs on imported steel and aluminum that prompted EU officials to warn they will respond to any increased tariffs with measures of their own. Let's bring in Will Ripley again to talk about this live in Beijing. Will, the president there criticizing the EU on one hand, praising the president of China on the other. Whether this was a joke or not, his words certainly have gotten a lot of attention. What's the reaction there?
They have it. Well, there's no official government reaction here, and we're not expecting one. China's officials normally don't practice directly responding to off-the-cuff remarks made by President Trump. They tend to talk bigger picture. But certainly it is encouraging for Xi Jinping and the Communist Party here in China to have the leader of the free world praising the abolition of a system that was set up to prevent China from returning to a crushing dictatorship. These term limits, presidential term limits, were established to try to prevent the bloody excess that was seen during the Cultural Revolution of Mao Zedong's era back in the mid-1960s into the late 70s. And you can see Chinese censors even right now blocking our signal. CNN here in China is now being completely blocked out. And whenever we bring this up, whenever we talk about this, Chinese social media is being censored. So people who have complained about the abolition of term limits that's expected to be approved very easily at China's top legislative gathering on Monday, all of those words are being banned from Chinese social media. So the government really trying to crack down on the message here. Even the reporting in China by the state-controlled media barely mentions that these term limits are going away. And when they do mention it, they say this is just to establish continuity in leadership during uncertain times, geopolitically and economically. That's how they're trying to sell this to the Chinese people. But there are certainly a lot of people here who are quite wary to see a return to strongman leadership. And certainly it's disheartening for them to hear President Trump basically endorsing it.
Will, was that a live picture of the television there just a moment ago there in China?
That was, yeah. So you can see anytime that we talk about this, and I have a monitor just off camera here as well, we're completely blacked out. That's how censorship works in an authoritarian government. There are probably times that President Trump would like to black out CNN in the United States, but that's just not the way it works in a democracy. But that is the way it works in an authoritarian country like China, a China that President Trump has praised repeatedly.
And that's why we wanted to show that, just two different systems. Again, the U.S. president seeming to really favor the way things work out with limitless power in China. Will Ripley live for us in Beijing. Thank you for the time.
To discuss the Korean situation and President Trump's comments on China and North Korea, we're joined live from Brussels by Stephen Erlanger. He's the New York Times chief diplomatic correspondent in Europe. Thanks for joining us, Stephen.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. Let's start with your reaction to President Trump seeming to praise the Chinese president for his power grab, saying Xi Jinping is a great guy, he's doing a great job, and maybe the U.S. should consider the same. Do you think he meant that?
Well, I think he believes it. I think he was making a joke, clearly, for a crowd that loves him. I don't think he rationally believes he should be emperor for life, but I think he would like to be. I mean, it's disconcerting to have a president of the United States even joking like that. But this is someone who has had some trouble understanding what the Constitution says and what the limits of his power actually are. He has trouble understanding, that his attorney general has his own sense of morality and distance from the Russia investigation. So, yeah, I think it's troubling. I know he was joking. I mean, the man's not irrational, but this is what he likes. He's always liked strong authoritarian leaders. He loves Vladimir Putin in ways we don't understand. He loves Xi Jinping. He loves Erdogan. He loves people who he feels can trample over minority opinion and do what they want. So that's our president.
And that's unsettling, isn't it? Well, let's talk about North Korea and South Korea and what could be on the table for this meeting on Monday, and if it will somehow link up to the United States.
Well, I think it really is fascinating because Kim Jong-un is, I think, more intelligent than people give him credit for being. At the same time, I think the Trump policy of aggressive rhetoric toward North Korea and its nuclear program and his effort to press the Chinese, his friend Xi Jinping, to do more to squeeze North Korea may be having an impact. But it may also be having an impact that was unexpected because the president of the South has been very interested in more reunification talks with the North, having more of a relationship, which is cutting out the United States. And that is something, I think, that does not necessarily bode well for American diplomacy in the entire region. I mean, we go back to the same question about President Trump's view of allies. Are they allies? Are they competitors? I mean, what kind of leadership role is the United States playing in Europe and in Asia? And are our allies moving to say, we better take care of our own business and not worry so much about the United States because its leadership is clearly wanting. There's a kind of vacuum about what to do. So I think it'll be interesting to see. I mean, nothing dramatic will happen, but the rapprochement between North and South, at least in terms of conversation, probably means, I would like it to mean, that talk of preventative war on the part of the United States against North Korea fades, or at least fades for now. But we'll have to see what happens. It's a mystery.
It is, and we'll certainly be reporting on it and hopefully talk with you again about that. Finally, though, I want to talk to you about the tariff front. President Trump not holding back regarding the retaliation that is promised by U.S. trade partners angry over the tariffs he's proposing on aluminum steel. He said of the EU on Saturday, they've been brutal to us. He's not backing down. Why is that, and what's at stake here for him?
Well, he has always had, for 30 years or more, a very simple view of trade, which is that it should be in balance. It's an old-fashioned mercantilist view. I think most people think it's not really founded in the way the world works now. But he made promises during the campaign to protect the steel industry. And I think for him, what's important is following through on his campaign promises. Now, of course, China was supposed to be the one that was being punished for dumping steel. But China is by far not the largest importer or exporter of steel to the United States. It is Canada, our good friends in Canada, and the European Union, our good friends in Europe. And China comes like number 7. So the European Union is saying, look, if you're going to do this, we're going to strike back. I mean, this is not a game, and there will be countervailing tariffs on American goods. And I think Americans will find steel prices will go up, which means the price of cars will go up and the price of lots of things will go up inside America. But this was Mr. Trump's promise to steel workers and steel makers, and I don't think anyone should be shocked that he's trying to keep that promise.
The question is, will it backfire? We will wait and see. Thank you so much for joining us, Stephen Erlanger from Brussels. Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks, Natalie.